I'm Effie Parks. Welcome to Once Upon a Gene, the podcast. This is a place I created for us to connect and share the stories of our not-so-typical lives. Raising kids who are born with rare genetic syndromes and other types of disabilities can feel pretty isolating. What I know for sure is that when we can hear the triumphs and challenges from others who get it, we can find a lot more laughter, a lot more hope, and feel a lot less alone. I believe there are some magical healing powers that can happen for all of us through sharing our stories, and I'll take all the help I can get.
Once Upon a Gene is proud to be part of Bloodstream Media. Living in a family affected by rare and chronic illness can be isolating, and sometimes the best medicine is connecting to the voices of people who share your experience. This is why Bloodstream Media produces podcasts, blogs, and other forms of content for patients, families, and clinicians impacted by rare and chronic diseases. Visit bloodstreammedia.com to learn more.
Hi there, and welcome to the show. This is Once Upon a Gene, and I'm your host, Effie Parks. And I have another rad dad with me today. So this dad has a 13-year-old boy named Ian who has congenital adrenal hyperplasia. And he's also the CFO at a company called Neurocrine Biosciences. And he is just genuinely such a nice guy, and he's truly admired by the people that he works with. And you can just feel how he leads with his whole heart. And he has a natural gift for being open and vulnerable. And I appreciate that so much, especially since I know there's so many dads out there who listen to this show who just want to be a listener. So for him, what started as a family deep in the trenches with rare disease, like most of you, turned into kind of a cool story and a once of a lifetime story, really. He got a random recruiter call. He moved across the country and he landed at a company that was creating a treatment for the exact condition his son had, but nobody there knew it. Anyways, we talk about the early years and the overwhelm and leaning into faith and showing up as a dad and what it felt like to sort of see it all come full circle. Anyways, I know you're going to love him. Please enjoy my conversation with Matt Abernethy. Okay. Hi, Matt. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Effie. Thanks for having me on today.
It's my pleasure. I had an intro call with you and your beautiful, intelligent coworkers a couple weeks ago, and you just gave me some Cliff's notes of your story, and I was like already crying. So everybody who's listening, buckle up for this dadvocate that you get to meet today. So how about just a little background? I know you grew up in a small town, I'm guessing, in Indiana, and today you're like I wouldn't ever pin you as a finance guy by looking at you. Judging a book by its cover, you look more like my brother who owns a roofing company, but you are an amazingly intelligent CFO at a major biotech. So walk us through a little bit of how you ended up there.
Well, first of all, I'm sure my colleagues will be happy to hear you call them beautiful. And I've never heard the word dadvocate. And so I'm glad to embrace that because I do think as a father of a child that has a rare disease, I think that's something important that you have to do as a father. And sometimes you don't know where to go as a father or what to do. But our job is to at least try our best. So I would have never predicted I'd be a CFO at a publicly traded company. I think that life has its way of working things out, and happy to share the story with you guys today. You know, I think I did start getting emotional right when I first started talking to you last time, Effie, if you recall. And, you know, I think that the story and Ian's life is something that is just remarkable and been a blessing and a learning opportunity all in one. You know, I'd say at first, just out of the get-go, Ian is my youngest son. I think it's important to talk about a child, not about his disease. He happens to have a disease, but Ian is now 13 years old, and he's got two siblings, and they're older. And so they make sure that they let him know that he's the youngest. And then, you know, he loves basketball. He's got a big heart and loves to sneak candy and root beer and everything like that. So I always want to start with Ian and who he is. And he's a character, and everybody who meets him loves him. But when he was 2, he was diagnosed a disease called CAH, or congenital adrenal hyperplasia. You've probably never heard of it. because I'd never heard of it. When he received the diagnosis, my wife and I, Brittany, were thrown into the deep end of trying to figure out what is CAH. And admittedly, for the first several years, things were really rough. We didn't know anybody who had the disease. We didn't know where to go. And you'd find yourself laying in bed at night thinking, am I doing the best for Ian? And that causes stress and anxiety. Where I guess the story takes a turn, Effie, which makes it quite remarkable, is I received a phone call from a recruiter about a CFO position at Neurocrine Biosciences. I wasn't looking to move my family from Indiana all the way to San Diego, and I definitely didn't expect that Neurocrine was working on a medicine for my son Ian in CAH. And so it was amazing for me to step back and think, well, what's the likelihood of a guy in Indiana getting a call about a CFO job in San Diego with a company working on a medicine for CAH? So that was a major turning point for my family and I. We had to take that leap of faith and move across the country, get involved in the biotech industry. And it's just been a remarkable ride, not always straight up. It is remarkable.
I mean, it's pretty divine timing, Matt. I mean, you're in the trenches with your child trying to figure out what's happening and what the disease means and if you're doing everything correctly. And then a job pops up and your son's disease is in their pipeline. That's wild. And again, maybe just divine timing. And
No,
what's even more interesting about you that I learned last time we talked again was that you didn't tell a soul about your son's diagnosis. You kept it quiet. And, his disease was literally in the building.
Yeah, it's one of those things that when you join a company, you don't want people to feel like they're going to let you down. You also want to make sure as a leader of a company that you're being objective and walking into a biotech company, the probabilities of success are actually only about 6% of medicines that hit the clinic end up getting approved. So my family and I, we knew there was a high likelihood that this program wasn't going to work. And regardless, my wife and I, and you said divine, we believe that's true. We felt called to come here. And even if the medicine failed in the clinic, which was a high likelihood, we knew we were called to be part of a company that was trying to find medicines for diseases like Ian and diseases like other people have, and felt like it was a calling, but it was difficult and it wasn't easy. And so, yeah, I took the approach that only a limited number of people knew that Ian had CAH within the company, and something that I, just didn't want to hold over people's head.
And then one day there wasn't a dry eye in the house because you did tell people. Can you tell me about that?
When I look back, and I'm wondering if you feel the same way, Effie, you have these vivid memories of times where you're dealing with, these acute situations, and some of them are joyful and some of them are panicking. And when you think about receiving a diagnosis, that's a moment in time, and I'm sure we can get to that if you want. Understanding that and working through it. Vivid memory of getting the phone call from the recruiter about the CFO job and me finding out. Vivid memories of revealing the data internally and having the team share it with us. And so at an all company meeting, we were sharing the results, and our CEO at the time had never put me on the spot to share. But it was obviously a meaningful moment for myself and my family. And I felt like the honor was due to those who had worked so hard on finding a medicine for Ian that I would share. This is personal. All the ups and downs and all around, it's worth it. And Ian ultimately became the first patient who got the medicine once it was approved. But it was an emotional event at Neurocrine, and shows sort of the family nature of when you're pursuing a medicine and how personal it can be, and connecting it within the company has been very special for me.
Yeah. Man, I can only imagine how everyone in that room felt. when they realized that they were actually helping a person. I mean, I know they know that they're making drugs for sick people, but when they actually get to like really see who they're helping, I think it's really transformational to how they show up to work every day. Did you notice anything different at the office after they knew the truth about you?
Well, yeah, I did. I think people can look at a finance guy, and I'm quite tall. You probably didn't pick up on that on the Zoom, but I'm 6'6". I'm a basketball guy, maybe a little intimidating. And so when you think about Matt Abernethy as the father, Matt Abernethy as the person dealing and helping a child, I think it made people understand, we're all in this together. I had people come up to me and say, I don't know how you dealt with all the delays through the years of the program and didn't, you know, get upset, because it took 7 years from when we joined to ultimately getting this approved. So I had a lot of people, ask me how I dealt with that. And then Ian actually came to a celebration party, and I pulled Ian up front, and I gave a few words, but I just said, I want everybody in the room and everybody in the company to know this kid is benefiting from all the work that you've done. And that's something quite special. And I know many times you explore medicines for kids that don't have any other option. And people with congenital adrenal hyperplasia don't have any other option other than taking high dose steroids for their entire life. So when you look at a kid and you see that you're benefiting them and benefiting their family, that's quite rewarding. And I think for those who were involved in discovering this medicine many years ago, Dimitri Grigoriadis, one of our founding scientific founders, Wiley Vale, who had passed away, his initials are actually etched on the pill. It's just super special. So yeah, I think that it's one of those pieces that I pinch myself doing even a podcast like this, being able to share about what the company had done, and I get to be part of it. I don't even know how to assess the probability of that happening. First of all, the phone call, let alone getting it through the whole process to get it approved, and Ian benefiting from it. It's been just quite the journey, quite the blessing.
You mentioned your faith last time I was talking to you, and it's clearly a big part of your life. And I wonder how this whole experience from the recruiter calling you to drug in your son has shaped or strengthened or changed over time with, your relationship with God.
Yeah, it's been just an amazing journey. And I would just back up and say, my whole life, I would have never anticipated being where I'm at. And I look back not just at this situation, but I look back holistically now to see God's hand has been in this all along. I had grown up, and you probably don't know this, Effie, but my father was a professional basketball player, and he played for Indiana University, won a championship with Bobby Knight, played for the Lakers, played for a few other places. So growing up, what was important to my family initially was being successful at athletics, being successful in career, and so those were sort of the moral principles, and be a good person, and that was some of the moral principles that we had lived by as a family. But when I got into my college years, I got a Division I basketball scholarship. I was sort of checking off the things that I thought would make me happy, and I found myself at a place where those things did not make me happy and left me low, and ended up taking an unplanned gap year off of college. And so during that year off, I ultimately became a Christian and gave my life to God. And through that, just seen his hand direct me ever since. So whether things have been hard or easy, or even whether the medicine was approved or not approved, I do think God has brought me through circumstances that have allowed me to know my ways are not his ways, and he is trustworthy all along. So when my wife and I would just stress, my wife and I, we both had to move across the country, away from family, away from everything else we knew. that was tough. My wife, she would tell you, did not want to move to San Diego, although it's beautiful here. I was away from family. But when you feel called and you're doing it together, it works itself out over those ups and downs. And so between my faith and my wife and our whole family, it's been just a blessing. And we've learned a lot in our faith walk and our faith journey through, Ian's situation, but then also moving across the country and trusting that we'd get a support system around us and our kids. And so it's really been an amazing journey and one that I want to share. Couldn't have orchestrated it. And I hope it provides hope and calling for other people as well.
Wow. I guess I would ask for someone listening, whether they're a dad or not, who's sort of feeling like that gap year that you took, and they're feeling maybe alone or overwhelmed or just deeply in the trenches or powerless due to rare disease or whatever thing is going on. What would you want them to hear from a dad who's lived it?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want you to know you're not alone. You have many people who are dealing with the same thing that you're dealing with. I found that during my gap year. I also found that, with raising Ian, or I found that with moving across the country, or with dealing with anxiety or bouts of depression. And so, I would just say for anybody listening, realize it might be unique, but you're not alone in it. There's people there to help, and you just have to take that first step. And so the paradigm shift for me, and instead of looking at faith as a religion and following rules, that it was actually a relationship, and that God, Jesus, wanted to have a relationship with me and help me and guide me through it. And so that's really been a piece of knowing I'm not alone in this. And from a rare disease perspective, my faith, and then also there's some great patient advocacy organizations that can also help plug you in with others who are dealing with the same thing. That's been quite a blessing for me.
I appreciate you pointing out your perspective on that. I know it can trigger or activate or, whatever, get a rise out of someone, but having different sort of ideas about what faith means to you is important because it isn't just one way.
Yeah, it's one of those pieces that that there's something much greater going on. And so I would encourage everybody, like I said, that you're not alone, and you're loved, and your child doesn't define you, whether they score 18 soccer goals or 2, or they have a really bad appointment or not. And that's sort of the ups and downs that really are hard, Effie, dealing with a rare disease, a child with a rare disease, that how you feel in life can really ebb and flow based upon the activities of the day or the news from the doctor. And how do you allow that not to dominate your life? That's difficult.
Yeah. Building up that reservoir, getting tools, really being intentional on how you react or respond. I mean, it's a muscle, and it's a constant habit that one needs to work on, right? Because this is full of it's bananas. It's the Wild West here in rare disease land.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So if you could go back to that super stressed out dad 8 years ago who didn't know if he was doing anything the right way and just trying to keep Ian stable, what would you tell him now? What would you tell yourself?
Well, maybe let's reflect a little bit on just when we received the diagnosis. And I'm not sure if this is relatable for everybody, but, my wife and I knew something was wrong with Ian. It just wasn't right for a 1-year-old going on 2. And so we sought help from a handful of specialists trying to figure out what was going on. And I think the latest thinking at the time had been he had a tumor, and we were going to have to go in and remove the tumor, and then, he would be okay. And I vividly remember this doctor walking into the office with a sheet of paper and a book. And she sits down with my wife and I, and she says, "Your son has classic congenital adrenal hyperplasia." When you hear your son has a disease, you're quickly trying to figure out, well, what does this mean? Is it going to go away? No, it's lifetime. How do you treat it? You give high dose steroids for the rest of your life. Is he going to be okay? Well, he's not going to die. And so you start getting all of this major information in a short period of time. And then you get this diagram of what's going on in your kid's body that you have no ability to comprehend at that time. And so you leave, or at least we left that appointment very overwhelmed. And then you think, do we need to go get expert care? Or is this just a disease that's unfortunate and we just get it treated locally? And we chose just to stay local. The doctor really cared for Ian. The doctor really wanted to do well by Ian. And so when you ask, what would I tell that guy 8 years ago? I would say, Matt, it's worth going and talking to a doctor who sees many more patients with classic CAH. And it's not to belittle the doctor that was helping Ian, because she was doing her best, but it's probably the only time she's ever had seen a CAH patient in her career. So I would say, Matt, it's worth, challenging. It's worth the time, effort, energy. It's worth the wait. If you can't get into that doctor, it's worth for 6 months. It's worth waiting. So I would probably say, Matt, you need to go and at least get a consultation from an expert. So that's one piece when I look back, and it's a little bit of a regret. But on the flip side, sitting here now, that's why I share it to any dads or moms who are going through that. So that's probably one thing specific to Ian and having a rare disease. And the second is just making sure that I keep in contact with my wife about how we're both feeling about the disease. And that was something that we were both thinking about it a lot, but not articulating it to each other. And so I do think there are some communication aspects of making it feel like we're in it together.
I mean, those are two separate podcasts right there with the wisdom bombs, Matt. Oh my gosh. Yes. Communication with your spouse. And the first part, obviously I can understand how it feels like a regret, and we all have that sort of similar situation along the line, but it's also an evergreen piece of advice, right? Because I know even for you probably now, and I know for me and our friends listening, like sometimes we just need that nudge to even do that now, 9-10 years later, with wherever our kid's at and whatever symptom we're seeing or having brushed off, or, maybe even just kind of taking a break because it's such a slog. Like, it's such an important reminder to know that our advocacy really does matter, and it can move the needles in other ways, and we can still fight for it, even though we're on the trajectory that we're supposed to be on, according to whomever.
Yeah.
And that we can always dig a little deeper or take another turn, or, whatever it is. So I think that action that we can take really never goes away.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've learned this through Ian, but then also being part of a company who's going after a lot of different diseases right now. These specialists are specialists for a reason. It's because they have a passion for helping people with rare diseases. And they also have a passion of helping those local doctors who maybe have never seen them or don't understand them. And so the communication pathway is typically pretty good. And so I wouldn't say you're forever walking away from a doctor who's local or helping your child. Is just adding another person potentially to the advice and counsel team, and they, their wisdom, at least what we've found, quite important and quite helpful.
Yeah. So I guess looking ahead, what are you most hopeful about? Maybe for Ian or all the CAH families, and maybe even a nugget of wisdom for someone who's in industry and sees how things are working. Like, are there things that industry can do better for the families, or have you seen a change in what's happening in general across industry that is like really sort of plugging into the families more? What do you have to say about any of that?
Yeah. So one thing that was really quite cool joining Neurocrine was I got connected with the CARES patient advocacy organization. And I think the advocacy organizations, because of the technological platforms, whether it's podcasts or whether it's, just being on the internet and being able to disseminate information, it's an amazing resource. And I think it also allows, as genetic testing continues to advance and you correlate genetics with potential diseases, medicines are continuing to evolve and utilizing that information to pursue future medicines or indications with existing medicines. So, there's a whole lot of connectivity now between patients, patient advocacies, and industry, and that I think is going to continue to evolve and change over time. And I think that that's a benefit for us. My wife and I met our first other person that had a kid with CAH, a handful of years ago. And so every year we go to the annual gala. And it's really just a time to be able to meet other parents or other people who are involved in helping patients with CAH. So I'm quite enthusiastic about patient advocacy groups that care about patients and connect patients, industry, and clinicians together so that we can get the best care for our kids. So that's providing me a bit of hope as I look forward for the industry. The second piece is more of giving me more concern on the industry is just some of the pressure coming out of Washington, D.C. that maybe causes innovation to be looked at in a different way and maybe less incentive. And when you have a failure rate of 96%, you have to make sure that if you do get the one right out of 100, that you can make adequate returns to basically recoup all the other investment. And so I do think there is a potential for better partnership and clarity with the government and the United States to ensure that early stage biotech companies continue to get access to the capital to advance medicines into the future. So I think that those are some of the things that come to mind for me as I think about the industry. And for Neurocrine, we pinch ourselves. We've had some great success helping on a couple different disease states at this point. One is called tardive dyskinesia, which is an involuntary movement disorder that patients get from taking antipsychotics. Our second medicine is the one that we are talking about here for Ian. And third, we were just able to acquire a company that has a medicine for patients with a rare disease called Prader-Willi syndrome. And it's a devastating disorder. And so for me, I get to see firsthand what we can do to bring new medicines to patients who have never had any other alternative. And that brings great joy and great hope that we can continue to do that as a company into the future.
Amazing. And we're all so relieved about the PRV.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. There are advocates out there, and I think it's just trying to find the way to make sure there's the right incentives in place. And there are very smart people and very caring people in the government. We just need to make sure policy aligns with making sure innovation can continue to be funded. And I think some companies and ourselves are one. We feel lucky and we feel blessed to be at the place that we're at today and take that seriously in terms of how do we continue to help more patients.
Yeah.
And I'm thankful to be here.
Well, I mean, it's really impressive and kudos to your company because drug development is hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
The 6% is that kind of hits hard when you hear it because I think we're all just like on this mission, right? And like we just know it to be true and none of us are ever stopping. And that is a harsh number.
Yeah. You have to get comfortable with failure. And it's something that every time, there's a patient behind it. In a family that was hopeful behind it. And so even if it's hard, trying to find ways through like artificial intelligence and other information to understand more quickly, is it going to work or not? That's some of what we're working on right now instead of it taking, 3 years in a phase 1, setting to find out, is it going to work? Can you expedite that in a quicker form to either decide not to pursue it or to go fast? And I am hopeful that the development cycle will get condensed from where it was previously to something, much, in the 6 to 8 year type range would be somewhere great. But we'll see if that can work itself out. And at the end of the day, you want medicines that help patients, but that are safe. And so one of the questions that I've gotten, Effie, is, were you and your wife nervous when we got Ian on the medicine? And I said, if I can't trust our company and what they've gone through to assess the safety through the clinical trials, I want to put my money where my mouth is and get Ian help quickly. And so I think that It's important, though, to make sure you go through the full process to understand what the implications are of taking the medicine, both the benefits and the safety, and what does that look like over an extended period of time, because typically these medicines are something you'll take for the rest of your life, or at least a big chunk of your life.
Well, I'm sure that's comforting for families to hear, especially who might be on the precipice of making decisions like that. And some of them are right now. I mean, you were talking about timelines. I mean, I've already seen it just since Ford's been here, like just rush. So I can only be as hopeful as somebody who's in the industry of making drugs that the timeline can definitely be shortened even more so and
Yeah.
be safe. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm
Absolutely.
guessing Ian would have thought it was really cool that his grandpa and his dad were professional basketball players. But I have a feeling that he probably thinks it's pretty cool that you're making treatments for kids like him.
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder, what is one thing that you hope he remembers about this chapter when he's older?
One that he's just loved, irregardless of the rare disease, but I think he really sees the calling behind this. And I always ask, hey, can I share about you? And he said, if it helps others, you absolutely anytime. And so, I share this not to promote him, not to promote me, but to really promote what's happened here. And I think it's quite remarkable. I look back on sort of the stressful times, and they continue with the child. As a parent, we'll remember, Brittany and I will remember making sure he got his medicine 4 times a day, and that the nurse can actually prescribe it or give it to him during the day, or being told he's not allowed to go into the pre-kindergarten class because they don't want to deal with somebody with these issues, or the fear of him having an adrenal crisis and carrying the shot at the soccer field so that if he breaks his leg, that he won't die of an adrenal crisis. So, as parents, we look back now that he's 13, and you see these elements of stress and protection. But I think if Ian looked back, my hope is that he says, I get to take some really cool trips with my dad up to Children's Hospital of Los Angeles, and we stop by Chuck E. Cheese on the way home, and I get to spend time with Dad. And so, I think honestly, that's probably how he would articulate this chapter, and that it's been cool to be able to share about Neurocrine and like Mr. I'll give you a really funny story. So Dmitry Grigoriadis we call him the Godfather. He had his hand involved in this medicine for many, many years, and he's just a great person. So when we got the medicine for Ian, and Ian's about ready to take it, he said, "Man, this pill is a little bit big, Dad." And I was like, "Well, Mr. Dmitry made sure that it would go down and you could take it very easily." And so he swallows the pill and he said, that went down smooth. Tell Mr. Dmitry thanks." And so I think like those are the things that he'll remember, or coming to the party and all of that. So it is funny as parents what we'll remember most, and we focus more on the stressful piece, but the kid focuses on their life. And I think that's a good perspective for all of us, just to think through how can we help them with the disease, but also help, as you and I were talking about before the podcast, ensure that there's, life continues to be lived for myself, for my wife and I, for my other kids. And so I think that's it's fun to reflect on that. And I've never thought about what is Ian going to think about this 10 years from now. But I think he'll think about how cool it was to take trips with me, and to have celebrated getting the medicine to help patients with CAH.
I love that so much. And maybe Ian could do all of us a solid and rebrand pharma commercials and swallow a pill and have a little jingle about going down smooth. That would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, that's funny.
Well, Matt, thanks for sharing your story and being vulnerable and trusting your gut and taking this job and being a part of something that helped create a drug to help people's lives live better. And, just the entire family system. So thanks for being my guest. It was an honor to meet you.
Yeah. Well, like I said, honored to be on the call. It's my first podcast I've ever participated in, and I didn't do this for me. We did it to be able to share some hope with parents out there, and also maybe those in industry, to not give up and to remember that there are patients on the other side of this, and we can work better together. And I do think that there's a lot of hope in the future for rare disease, and the advancement of technology is going so quickly. Pairing that with the regulatory agencies and ensuring that we can get safe and effective medicines to patients and families is so important. So I feel honored and thankful to be able to join a podcast like this, and really admire what you're doing and the platform that you provide for people to hear from. People are going through similar, unique but similar situations, and so hopefully this has been helpful.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And everyone listening, especially if you're new, anyone on my show is a resource. So if you felt called, I'm sure you can send Matt a message and he would be there to answer it. So if this story touched you and you want to say something to Matt, feel free. I'll have his information in the show notes. So thank you so much.
I hope you've been enjoying this podcast. If you like what you hear, please share this show with your people, and please make sure to rate and review it on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also head over to Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter to connect with me and stay updated on the show. If you're interested in sharing your story, or if you have anything you would like to contribute, please submit it to my website at effieparks.com. Thank you so much for listening to the show and for supporting me along the way. I appreciate y'all so much. I don't know what kind of day you're having, but if you need a little pick-me-up, Ford's got you.